Welcome, Alex. It's awesome to have you on the podcast.
Thank
We
you.
get to meet in person in September.
That was
Uh,
a good time at JWA.
it was a good time. I know it was so fun to see you guys there and to meet you in person. And I was going to have my gorgeous travel mug out, which I use all the time. I think my daughter tried to use it, and I was like, "Hey, that's mine. Don't touch." It's
Well, if
so
you lose it, we can get you another one.
they're gorgeous. I think somebody said you had them like an artist do the artwork and then had them produced. Yeah.
Yeah, they're neat. I haven't even gotten one myself. Like, come on
Uh-oh.
now.
There you go. You better talk to marketing
Oh, I know.
about the swag distribution. Okay, so I want to make sure I properly introduce you. So Alex Neal, your LinkedIn says you're a product specialist at Proximity, but I suspect you're a little bit of a man of many hats, and you're located in Denver, Colorado. Tell me, you have actually been in co-working for kind of a long time. This like makes you almost like an OG since 2015. So yeah, give us a little bit about your background and tell us your co-working story. And then we're going to dive into, Alex, you have this very cool role where you talk to lots of operators. And I love talking to, folks that work for companies like Proximity, because you get this like macro micro view of what's happening in the industry. It's like you see the trends and then you get like the word on the street. So we're going to talk about some trends that you're seeing, based on folks that you get to interact with. So tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I guess I'll back up to the very beginning. 2013 rolled around when I graduated from IU, and I wanted to move to Denver. You can see
As we all
the
do.
growing trend.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, I had an offer on the table from an internship that I previously had, but I mean, fresh out of college, I want to go somewhere cool, right? I'm born in Indianapolis, and great
You're
place
good
to
now.
grow up,
Yep.
but I needed to explore the world a little bit. And then, I just started doing some research about some options out there, and I discovered this whole co-working like thing going on. It was new to me. And in fact, I read about a developer that was traveling all over Southeast Asia, hopping into different countries, weeks at a time and whatnot. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So I started doing a little bit of research and made a pitch to my boss at the time that, hey, what about me working remote? And at least I can go into an office still. And then that's kind of the start of my whole co-working career, you could say. About a year later, I ended up joining the co-working space that I stayed with for almost 7 years afterwards. And then wore a lot of hats from, let's say, 2014 or 2015 until the end of last year. And finally joined Proximity. Just figured I wanted to switch gears a little bit, get from an operator side into more of the, I don't know, the management portion. And it just made sense being based in Colorado. Proximity was a company that I've always, met a few people kind of here and there through just the grapevine and whatnot, and decided to join then.
Super fun team. So I can see why that would be compelling. Okay, you did wear a lot of hats. I don't think I looked at that very clearly the last time we chatted. So site manager, is that like community manager type of role, like ops
Right.
manager, and then marketing, and
Janitor.
then IT, like literally a little bit of everything.
You become an expert at literally everything, more than you want to know. I can fix a coffee maker. I can do door access, Wi-Fi, printers. I still have nightmares about that one. I think that's the hardest thing to solve from an operator standpoint. But yeah, I think I've done it all. And yeah, you don't get afraid to roll up your sleeves and get dirty.
This probably makes you dangerous when you talk to operators on the phone, because you can relate so well that probably you can go down some rabbit holes of
Totally. And I always have to like mention, like, proximity aside, my personal experience, this is what we've seen, this is what we recognize. And people tend to appreciate that. I think they like just hearing my background, and really that at the end of the day, I'm trying to solve problems for them and not necessarily sell them on, something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally love that. I think there's a little bit that happens in this industry. I see it happen in our Facebook group. Like, you get an N of one answer, like, do this, it worked for me. And you have this great perspective of like, here's what, here's what's working for a lot of the operators we work with, not just
Right,
one, but like
right.
across the board. Here's kind of what we see. So tell me, are you a skier?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Actually, that is the main reason why I moved to Colorado. I wanted to ski every weekend.
Yeah.
And Peyton Manning happened to move over to the Broncos like a year prior, so it just made sense for me to.
All the stars
It
lined
was,
up.
it was my destiny.
So I can't remember if I told you this when we chatted, but when I was in business school, I had a non-business school friend who was doing an internship or school or something in Denver. So for Thanksgiving, first year, I guess it must have been the first year of business school, I went to Denver for Thanksgiving and I was like, I'm going to move here. This is amazing. And I'm going to date myself a little bit. This was like early internet, like 2003 or four. Three, probably, maybe two,
Those
so
are some
like
good times.
yeah. But Denver at that time, I was like, so I started to kind of poke around, like, what would I do there? Unclear. It was unclear at the time. Lots of like telecom. I
Yeah.
now have my husband's sister and parents live there, and the sister and the husband both work for Comcast and whatever the other big one is there. But I was like,
Charter,
yeah, I don't want to do that. So at the time, I was like, well, that's not going to work because where would I work? But yeah, I wanted to live the dream just like you are. So I stayed in Chicago. But now, I mean, somewhere in there, things like totally flipped over, and Denver has so much happening, and it's such an exciting place to be. So, and lots of
Oh, it
co-working
is.
spaces and
Tons.
yeah. Okay, so proximity, tell us a little before we dive into kind of trends and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about what proximity does and what your role is. How do you spend your days?
Sure. At the end of the day, the goal of proximity is to make things as automated as possible. So we like to take any of the existing tools that you might be using today. So we can time your system, your door access control, things like that. And really, at the end of the day, is we want to try to make things as seamless as possible, not only for the operator, but like the members themselves. So we try to focus on what's going to be the most intuitive things, to the usage, but also making sure things are accurate. Because I think there's one thing to automate things, but if you're not able to necessarily report accurate data, it becomes very difficult for you as an operator or someone in the decision-making role to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to grow my business?
Yeah, I love that. And how do you spend your day?
It's talking to tons of operators, new, old, veterans. It's fascinating. I mean, I think that's what continues to drive me in the co-working industry, is because every person you meet, they have just an interesting background, really how they got to where they're at. And I think I like to be a connector. So even if I can't help you right in the moment, I know someone that can. And that's really what excites me at the end of the day. So it's just, I love talking to people.
Which is good. That must be what you do literally all day long.
Literally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad it's a good fit and that you find it so interesting. Speaking of automation, so maybe I'm going to sneak this in on you because we didn't have this on our list of trends, but I'm curious, like, how many people sort of talk, like lead with that to some extent. Like, I want a really automated space. So Brian Watson is one of the co-founders of Proximity, right? After we talked, I can't remember why I was in there. I'm fairly new to posting to YouTube. We put the podcast up. I have some videos up. So there's a big opportunity for everything co-working on YouTube. But I went in and I sorted most, popular posts. I've mentioned Brian's is by far the most popular, like by like multiples and multiples. We get like not a lot of views on all the. I would encourage anybody listening can watch us on YouTube if they want to check out the YouTube channel. But I have to think it's the topic, because he's talking about automation
Right.
and how he's automating the brand alt space that he's working on, and just a
Yeah.
ton of interest. So if anybody out there is interested in automation, go check out the Brian Watson video on our YouTube channel. I can't even remember where it's from, but just type in Brian Watson, everything co-working, and you'll see it come up. So yeah, I'll sneak that in as a topic. Like, what are people thinking about these days around automation?
You know, people don't actually realize sometimes what their real problem is. And I think that's part of my job is
Yeah.
I ask a lot of questions at the beginning. And it's like, okay, like really, you come to me for one thing, they think they need some sort of management platform. They don't really know why. Oftentimes, it's like, yeah, we just need something to build better. Like right now, we're using Venmo or Zelle, things a little more manual. And of course, things get lost. And then once you start having potential investors, they're going to want to see the numbers. So it kind of starts there, but eventually, I ask all these right questions. Oftentimes, they're a very lean team, so they don't have necessarily all the resources to, manage all these aspects of it, which kind of leads into, well, what if I can, eliminate some of those headaches? Let me take half of your day-to-day just things that have to get done off the plate. And when I started painting that picture, I used Brian's example as a great one, how he can sell day passes that's going to automatically generate a key and then Wi-Fi for the day, but then you can't go somewhere else and just piggyback on the Wi-Fi for the rest of the week. When I tell that story, it really paints that picture of like, wow, that's really cool. Like, we want to hire.
What's possible?
Yeah, especially if they're not hiring a community manager right away. I think, a lot of co-working operators start with I have a building, I run a full-time business, but I also want to help either other entrepreneurs or I want to bring other people. Next thing you know, they get 2 full-time jobs, and being able to at least, eliminate some of that day-to-day operational stuff that it just have to happen, really goes a long way for them.
Yeah. Anybody who's listening who has a space already knows, like, it's a really operational business.
Yeah.
But you can apply technology to it to make it a lot simpler. You just, to your point, have to know what's possible. So you do a lot of listening, and then you get excited thinking, you right, like all the problems that you can solve if you dive in. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anything more unique than what Brian, I mean, Brian's, example seems sort of simple, but he's also layering in a lot of like user experience around it. Like, he's not just thinking about like, okay, how do I get somebody in the door for the day, but how do I help them feel comfortable, give them sort of the tour and,
Right.
all the things that he's thinking through.
I would say, and this kind of leads into some of the trends I'm seeing, is people are taking almost that co-working hospitality experience and they're applying it into other like industries or even areas that are, let's say, more archaic or traditional, you could say. I think, the past 2 years, we've gotten so used to like things on demand, being able to pick up our phones and do a lot of these things. Just really easing that whole user experience for everyone. So things like we've seen, I recently had someone that has a batting cage center that came on board, and they can take different components that we do today in proximity. Yeah. I mean, I guess you can think about it. We're solving the same or different problem, but with the same solution. So they're applying those kind of like that flex and kind of on demand and really just that easy of user experience to things like that. And it goes in a lot of areas too.
Right. If you need to bill, reserve things, like give people access, like, is it an automated batting cage, or were they just looking to kind of apply technology to it?
Things like reservations and then like access, so that they can have access control on the cages themselves. Yeah. So they're not able to get into that batting cage until they have
their reservation slot.
The reservation.
Yeah.
And we're adding screens on the outside of the rooms or even inside the cage themselves that indicate how much time you have available and things like that.
Visual cues and
exactly.
Yeah. And to your point, you just don't see a lot of that applied to something like batting cages. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking a very simple kind of like, we've done what always what works, and applying it. So we see things in other gyms as well. It's same solution, different problem.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, kind of related, we were talking about kind of like the wellness trend and people wanting to do live, work, and play. You mentioned even kind of a co-op of talk about the co-op example. Not that they're using proximity, but just sort of an interesting kind of shared trend?
Yeah, so there's a group in Denver that they all are in the kind of snow sports, outdoor industry, and at the end of the day, I guess you can look at them as competitors to one another. But what brings them together is the fact that they're selling to the same buyer. So if I'm a Christie Sports or an REI or someone like that, and I want to go look at product, I'm more inclined to go to a space that has a number of different vendors, and I don't have to spend the next 5 days looking at products. I can just spend a whole day. It's almost like the gas station effect in the same way, right? People tend to gravitate to where all the action's at.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like the 7-Eleven where you can get everything you need all at once.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Totally.
Yeah, it is interesting. It would be interesting to see if there's some sort of like shared model that makes sense on that. Although probably being in the business we're in, we want to apply the shared model to everything, whether it works or not.
Yeah, I think I'm really starting to see that a little bit in like kind of medical offices too, or at least offices that focus in a very what do you call it, a certain discipline of medicine, so to speak, right? So they have therapists or other types of people in that discipline, and they need either shared medical space, maybe because they would typically meet their clients on Zoom, and they're trying to do it all in one day in a more HIPAA compliant area, or again, maybe their patients are all seeing the same type of people. So you got a therapist in one, and another one in a different area. So
yeah, kind of aggregating either the niche or aggregating wellness professionals. I've seen that a bunch in my startup school. Pretty recently, I would say in the last, maybe year or so, therapists, and to your point, that stuff's awesome. On the weekends, they can give access to people who need to get in. So the technology is important there. The tablets, for the one instance, they're doing sort of nothing is dedicated. So it's right, therapy rooms, but they're can be booked by any therapist. So having all those cues like this is busy, it's not busy, not related to technology, but extra soundproofing and even like how the data is stored on the back end. I love that. And I think it's maybe part of like the consumerization of like, I want to go someplace nice to get my healthcare done. And one of the other students I have, I think she's just trying to remember what her professionals are. She has to have plumbing in every single like treatment room or office space. So that's like kind of a bigger, a bigger build out, but same thing. She was like, it was like super traditional medical space. And then she made it sort of like spa-like. It's really nice. And if you're a professional who can, who's, licensed to practice on your own, it's such an amazing way to get started in private practice on, sort of those flexible schedules, which is very cool. But, there's a lot of scheduling and just like, operational stuff that goes along with all of that. So being able to enable that is super important.
And I think where it really comes into play too is it allows these therapists to expand their business. So traditionally you may have to rent a medical office for a long-term lease, right? And you maybe only use it 2 days a week.
Right.
But now it opens up possibilities that, I'm going to back up a little bit. With the whole work from home trend, a lot of people are moving towards suburbs. Here in Colorado, a lot of people are moving to the mountains or, more outdoorsy areas. And they tend to lack a lot of these, I guess you can call them city infrastructures. That might not be the right word to use. But now if I'm a therapist, I can practice in Denver, I can be in Leadville, I can go all the way to Steamboat, Vail, Aspen. And, I don't necessarily have to incur all that overhead to have multiple offices. I'm able to schedule my patients all at a time slot that I have on one of these. So I think that's one of the like contributing factors to this growth is we're having people kind of moving out of city centers into areas that are, I don't know what you want to call it, more rural, even remote to an extent.
Yep. Yeah. I have to give a shout out. I mentioned when we talked to David LaSalle, who's in Estes Park. he's a great example of like on the way to the mountains, small
Yeah.
town, and he's got the co-working space plus the fitness space plus the event space. So he's trying to, but yeah, you can kind of work from anywhere now. Okay, let's talk about co-warehousing.
Yeah, that's been a hot topic that I've been hearing a lot lately. Really, again, you're kind of taking some of an old school industry or model and
Yeah.
applying it to this modern approach. And I think part of that comes from just people at home that's getting into their little side hustle. They during the past 2 years were so used to ordering literally everything. So people got into businesses where they're making things and shipping it from their home. Now it's become their full-time gig, and you can no longer operate out of your own house. And even then, I think some of these individuals, they have very seasonal items they focus on. So the idea of a co-warehouse is starting to become a hot topic. And in fact, when we were at GWA in September, there are a few individuals that are all getting together to talk about that. Again, I think we're applying that flexibility model, almost that space on demand, or being able to scale and as you need, especially if it's a seasonal type thing.
Yeah, we did a session on this recently, and the founder of the loading dock in Raleigh, he said he thinks like every market should have a co-warehousing space, even more so than a co-working space, because yeah, I think his perception was like there are people doing these businesses even in smaller markets.
Oh yeah.
Don't have a way to like get into like fulfillment and distribution. Yeah, do you have have you started to have conversations with people who are calling in talking about that model, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm gonna go back to using in Colorado as an example. I mean, there's a lot of like cool, innovative outdoor products that come out of Colorado, right? Um, and a lot of these companies now are trying to exist in the areas that they play in. So of course, if I'm building something for the ski industry,
Yeah.
right, I'm probably going to be closer to the mountains, but that also puts me a lot further away from distribution, packaging, and all those things. So now we're able to have these like shared spaces in again, traditionally smaller markets or areas that are not traditionally served. It just brings, I mean, it attracts more talent, more entrepreneurs that, again, they want to build a product in the area. They want to build it and test it in the area that they're in. So I
Totally.
think that's a good example there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, yeah, so we talked about niche spaces, which I see a lot too. Any specific like cool niches that you see coming through? Got the wellness, like the medical thing. I have some I have some doing we have one doing a space for attorneys. I won't share all their secrets, but they have some really good. I know I have to be careful sometimes, like, oh, I don't want to, there are lots of needs that niches have that other people
Yeah.
don't. So even like the spreading out, like, oh, we'll get licenses to this or licenses to that, and we can get a cheaper like per seat rate or just access to it. I see people just thinking creatively about, yeah, what can we share and what makes sense for us to be together. And then we won't share the too many secrets, but we had somebody doing like a golf theme that
Oh
that I'm
yeah.
working with, that you said, oh, I talked to so and so.
That's a little bit of the work and play model coming
Yeah,
into play. It's kind of like, I think one of the ways of trying to get people back into the office, for at least when it comes to, especially when it comes to like corporate customers, is they're trying to bring the comforts of home to the office. I mean, I think it might sound silly, but we're so used to dual monitors. If I got to go back to my office and I only have a single one, forget it. I'm not going to come in. I'm going to
oh
stay
my
at
gosh,
home.
it's, what, that is the silliest. It's not silly, it sounds silly like when you
Yeah.
think about it, but I think that people care. My husband is like that. He kind of drives me nuts about it, but yeah, he's got this giant monitor and he's like, yeah, I don't want to go to a co-working space, I would need to take my monitor.
Oh
And
yeah.
so if he knew like he could roll in and just plug in and, have his big monitor, that would make a big difference. Because we have dogs and they bark all the time. And I'm always
Oh
like,
yeah.
just
Oh
leave,
yeah.
go somewhere. Yeah. And he's like, no, I can't go. I need the monitor.
I like to stack my calls when I'm able to get out of the house. That way I'm just in 100% pure focus mode, and they get all, I'm just super productive that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to the whole like niche spaces, I think we're seeing, I've actually been talking to a handful of like art studios or,
Mm.
spaces that either give like some sort of stipend or like a year long program, where they're, I mean, I guess you almost say it's almost like an incubator in a way. But they, like, let's just go back to the art example, right? They need certain things that you can either afford on your own, or you're not going to find it anywhere else. Like things
Yep.
like let's say called like a plotter, for example,
Yeah,
or
like a big format type of printer. Yeah.
a kiln for ceramics, things like that. I
So
mean,
fun. Yep.
you're not going to be able to afford one on your own, nor you're going to have the space. So that's actually a handful of people that we've talked to that are, opening these spaces that are focused in one area. And again, we're solving the same problem in the sense of, rather than reserving conference rooms, now we're reserving that plotter, that large format printer, or even the
Just like
kiln,
an
things like
asset.
that.
It's just a different kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what all we're doing at the end of the day is managing an asset.
Yeah.
Um, tend to be more physical, but yeah, it could be really anything at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love that. I'm trying to think about other niches that I see come through. Oh, I have one that's working on, and this exists in a couple of other markets, but lobbyists, like political lobbyists, which they don't really have specific equipment, but they called me the other day, and they're like, we're in session and they're in like whatever, the legislative building, and there's no place to like do your stuff and talk to your clients in between calls. It was so loud. It was like I was like, it was like non-functioning. And they're like, see, this is why we're doing the space. It's going to be amazing. And it's within walking distance. They had really specific real estate requirements
Yeah,
for it. But that one I love too.
it almost sounds like trying to get to a Starbucks, and you just never know what to expect if you want to meet
Totally.
the
Might be
customer.
cool or it might be just mayhem. Yeah.
Yeah,
Loud. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But also a fun niche. I think they'll, and I love niches from a marketing, because you played a marketing role for a while. Like when you can speak specifically, to a very specific audience member, because, the market they're in definitely has other co-working spaces, but
yeah.
nobody is for the lobbyists. And, they'll do some pretty specific things to solve their pain points, and they'll have event space that's, they do a lot of fundraisers. So anyway, that's a fun one. Yeah. I really enjoy the niche locations. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other live work examples. We were talking about like, why aren't there more co-working spaces at the mountains? So if anybody's listening,
Brian has just opened one I saw in Durango, the resort that's down there.
nice. Okay.
Um,
I saw he had a new location online. I would have had to Google. I didn't know where it was.
yeah, and I got a couple guys that are opening a space in Steamboat, at the old distillery there, if anyone knows where that's at. So I'm gonna go, just do some work over there.
Totally. You need to do some customer site visits.
Right, right. And the pass is closed, so I got to stay for a couple
Yeah,
of days.
exactly.
But yeah, it's that work play kind of model, and I think when you're tying into some of the niches again, it's a mix.
Yeah, totally. I think we'll start to see more of that. And to your point, like, how do you get people to get out of their house and to experience something kind of bigger than just work? And certainly weaving in the working and playing. Side note, we were in Tahoe this weekend and spent 1 hour trying to get to the mountain on Saturday. And we had gone, I don't know how many miles, call it 3.
Jeez, that's insane.
We turned around. We've never done that before. We were sitting there. We're like, okay, if we're not, at this point, but it's one of those like where the Google map says 46 minutes, but every time you look at
Oh
it,
yeah, oh yeah,
the
oh
ETA is
yeah.
like 10 minutes more. And you're like, how could this be? The algorithm is broken. What's
I,
happening?
I'm one of those people that gets Google Maps, I get Apple Maps, I even throw Waze in the mix.
Yeah, no, I know. My husband is like, check Waze. What does Waze say? I'm like, same thing. It's broken. It's so busy there now. And I think it's because people can, work wherever. And
yeah.
so
Um,
more people come to town and stay. But yeah, so we had to bail. But the problem is you have to go so early now, that anyway, in Tahoe, anyway, you have to go really early in order to avoid the traffic, and then you have to like hang out because the lifts don't open until 8:30 or 9.
Same
So
here in Colorado. And, you actually you said something that just sparked a reminder of a thing I saw the other day. So talk about getting out of the house now. One of those large, fancy bikes that were very popular when we're all working from home.
during COVID, yep.
Apparently, they have been downgraded by investors because there's a surge of people going back into the gyms now.
Ooh, good.
And now we're seeing gyms too also competing with the work from home crowd or even traditional offices because there's I know a couple large gym brands out there that are incorporating some sort of workspace within the gym itself.
I know Equinox is one. I have not been to one of their locations. I'm super interested to see that in action.
Yeah, and I think that the need to really break up your day is huge. So it's things like having a gym to go to or these other work play environments. We've gotten so used to just logging in at 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and now we feel guilty if our phone buzzes in the middle of the night. We got to break up our day somehow, and easier said than done for some. But I think that's why we're starting to see some of these places too that are adding some sort of flex component to it.
Yep, totally. Yeah. Okay, so who are your favorite? Like when you talk to somebody, I know you love to talk to everyone, whether you can solve their problem or not, but what are the types of operators that you talk to that you're like, yeah, this is like a perfect fit. We can, we're a great technology partner for these guys. Like what's their is there like a profile or like a mindset or a, certain thing they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily want to target or like say there's one specific type. I think it really comes down to someone that's kind of open to, going against the grain in a sense, being able to adapt their processes to different things. I think it's easier to think you have a great idea in your head, but then you don't realize some of the things once you start factoring all the pieces of the puzzle together. So kind of being open-minded to an extent, and willing to experiment with something that might be out of the norm. I think those are the people I like to work with, mostly because we're solving a problem that it's not like a cookie cutter approach to it. We're solving something that, takes a little bit of brain power and kind of getting creative with it. Those always excite me.
Yeah, because you have a platform that can apply in so many different ways. And you know what? I'll use this chance to say, anybody who's listening who is not open to space yet, do a demo with Proximity first, and then write your operating procedures.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't write the procedures first because, to your point, right, you get in your mind like, okay, we're going to do it this way. And then you want the technology to fit your way. And maybe it doesn't. And so it's easier to know what's possible with the technology. Let me kind of fit into this.
It's always good to have a vision, but then figuring out how to reach that vision. That's where you want to kind of keep
intersection that
little open-ended.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's never too early to do demos, right? I think I always encourage folks to do them nice and early because maybe you're not gonna hit start on your membership button, but to know what's possible, to your point, like what problems can I solve? What can I apply technology to? Because you may not even be aware or have thought about those things. So just to start your exploration process. And you guys you're happy to talk to people early.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of reasons I think it's important to start early is because one, you kind of want to know what's out there. And two, some of these conversations I have lead into like this light bulb moment, like, Oh, I never even thought about that. That's awesome. That's great. Let me kind of go back and sit on it a little bit, and we'll get back in a couple weeks or a couple months or so, and we'll have another discussion. And it really opens up kind of more creative thinking versus like, this is the plan. This is what I'm going to go with. I will need to open tomorw.
Right.
Things
Don't
like
call
that.
when you're opening tomorrow. Please don't do that. Yeah.
And probably one of the biggest things too is, I mean, you and I talked about a little bit of how there's a lot of delays and things. I mean, especially with all these chip manufacturers, if you need a tablet or you need certain door access stuff, it's better to prepare for it now versus I need it in 3 weeks kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah. Right now you should still assume things might be hard to get. And so confirm that, know what hardware do you need? And, because door access hardware, something was pretty delayed for a while across the board. It's hard to get.
Yeah, it's always changing, I feel like, too. But to me, that's a crucial component into your space, especially a space management thing. Otherwise, you're going to be having to replace lost keys and stuff like that, and that becomes a big pain for an operator, I would say.
Yeah, no, 100%. I had one other reason. Oh, the other reason to start early is because you think it doesn't, proximity is pretty straightforward. It doesn't take forever to set it up, but
no,
as you get closer to opening, you got a lot of things you're thinking about, and you want to be able to sign up members once you start your pre-launch. So if you're in the bucket of starting a space, not somebody who's thinking about switching, just never too early to explore, start thinking, and then start getting a plan in place for, when you're going to start configuring it.
And I think you and I, Jamie, can speak from experience here. As soon as you're ready to pre-sell your membership, do it. I mean, nothing better than being able to have, good amount of occupancy on day one, especially if you got some, some leeway on before you start paying rent. So
Exactly. You want to ramp up as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And yes, Proximity has some great content. We've been doing some partnering, like in the newsletter, we have some good content. I think we were running a pre-sales link, but Proximity has you have some great marketing content on the website, which is probably a good transition for, if people are interested in chatting and learning more about the platform, or just talking industry talk with Alex.
Oh, totally. I love that.
Should they go to the website and schedule a chat, or what's the best approach?
You can either go to the website, book a time on there, or Jamie, maybe if you're going to include a link, you can put my email or even my booking link. I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone. It's fun to solve problems.
That's awesome. Do you miss being on the operator side?
Yes and no. I mean, I still go back to Thrive in Denver, where I used to be with, and
so you'll go work there as a member.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, everyone's like family there. Yeah. It's just like, it's fun to go into there, but I don't miss the certain things like, like I said, I wore a lot of hats. Like if the printer is out of paper, I don't miss having to go and track down things, swap out the toner or whatnot. That's why, I thought getting to the software side of the industry is an easy transition. And it's just, I'm able to share what I've learned with others that way.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Thank you for taking time out of your operator chat schedule to do this and kind of share your perspective. We'll have to do it again, because I love kind of talking to other people about, what they see happening. So we'll put all your links in the show notes. So anybody looking for those, the show notes you can find on the website. I also like to remind people they're in your podcast app, usually if you kind of open up the detail of the episode. So then you don't forget. I usually tend to forget when I listen to podcasts and then have to, look something up later. So awesome. Alex, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Jamie.
Until next time.
Yeah, it's fun.